Welcome to the Vincent Ford Podcast. What is a makeup primer? I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about what a primer is and what it's not. So I really want to break down what types of primers there are, why we use them, of course, myth busting, and my best product suggestions for primers. So there should be something in here for everyone. If you are mature skin, if you are textured skin, if you're oily skin, if you're dry skin, I'm going to have some answers for you, and it's all going to be about primers. So when it comes to primers I think that people think about are always ones that make your makeup last longer. So you apply the primer, you put on your foundation, and it's supposed to last longer, look smoother. But primers are more than that. That's one type of primer. But primers are a very important part of the makeup routine because they prep the skin. So when you've heard me talk about prepping the skin with skincare, primers is another way that you can prep the skin. Now, do you have to use a primer? Is it always necessary? The answer is no, because as you've seen on many of my tutorials, I don't always use primers, but I do use them when they're appropriate. And I don't also use one type of primer on every single person. I like to mix and match. I'm going to get more into that and how to do that. But I really kind of want to break down the types of primers that there are. So the first one, which you might not know about, you might know about it, but you might not. Hydrating primers. So when you think about a primer isn't always about like smoothing the skin and making it last. It can also be about boosting the hydration. So hydrating primers are going to be ideal for dry skin types, for mature skin types that tends to be more dry. And think about them as kind of your after moisturizer step. After you finish your moisturizer, your sun protection, it's the step you do before foundation. This is a really great trick too. If you are one of these skin types, no matter what skincare you put on, what foundations you use, you can't get that glow that you see often, especially tutorials that I do. This is a good way because what it's going to do is going to boost the hydration of your skincare. It's going to lay that moisturizer and the hydrating element underneath your foundation. And it doesn't have to be used all over the face. This is something, for example, if you're a combination skin and you have an oily T-zone, but the rest of your face doesn't have the same amount of oil, use a hydrating primer around the face. So think about the cheeks, the chin, the areas that are maybe around the nose if you get dry around these areas. And try using a primer here, because what it's going to do, it's going to give you the hydration. And then you can use a different type of primer in the areas that have more oil, which I'll get into those types. So hydrating primers are going to be for glow. It's going to be boost of hydration. There's a lot of them that have other skincare benefits built in, but these are, really beautiful, kind of glowy. Sometimes they have, micropigments in them to, like mica to, illuminate. It's almost like we used to do back in the day, we used to just mix a little of a liquid illuminator before. And now, they have all these primers now that you can use instead. Okay, so the next one, mattifying primers. So these, I think, are ones that you probably have heard about that are quite common, that have been around for many years. So mattifying primers are all about that. It's about mattifying. So these are good for oily skins or combination skin. And they keep the shine in check, but they're not going to strip your skin, because a lot of times oil-based kind of, really like water-based moisturizers, sometimes they can not give you enough hydration. So these are more about controlling oil. A lot of them have built-in micro powders in them, which are going to help absorb the excess sebum, which is the oil that your skin produces. These are really going to be good for people who, have a lot of oil throughout the whole face or through the T-zone. And this is one that you can use with the one I mentioned before. So hydrating primer in the dry areas, mattifying primer in the oily or the combo area. And this is a great way to mix two different primers to get an effect on the face where you want evenness, you want glow in certain areas. So mattifying is really good for that. The next one is blurring primers or pore-filling. So blurring is different. So it's not mattifying. So think about mattifying controls oil. Blurring is going to be about making the texture of the skin look softer. Now, I'm not going to try to tell you that you're going to put some blurring primer on and all of a sudden you're going to have glass, beautiful, smooth skin. It's not going to happen. But what it does do is it softens. It's about the way the light hits your face. So some of them, I'll mention some brands I like, but one that comes to mind is the e.l.f. Putty Primer. It's a very affordable one. This one, it has the word putty in it, and you think, oh, I'm spackling my face. But it is good for people to have open pores. It allows the foundation to sit on top of the skin, so almost float in between the layer of the skin and the foundation. It sits in between, and it allows you to blur it to, an effect. It's not going to make it look perfect, but it does help. So blurring is going to be great for textured skin and large pores. It's really good for that kind of soft focus filter-like finish. It's going to give you kind of this softer look. It doesn't allow, really glowy primer is going to bring out texture if you have it, because it's about the light hitting it. Imagine you put like a metallic, something on your clothes, like a metallic finish. The way the light hits it, you're going to see every crease, every bump. So mattifying is really good for texture because it prevents the light from hitting these areas, but blurring is going to kind of cut the difference. It's going to create a little bit of a soft glow. It's going to make sure the light doesn't bounce too much off of it. So this is really good for people, or like I said, mix it up. If you have textured cheeks or textured nose, use this in this area and then use the other primers in others. I've used up to 3 or 4 primers on a face if I want to get that perfect finish with the glow in just the right places. The next is gripping or longwear primers. Now, longwear primers, I think, have been around for a long time. I think that gripping is something I'm seeing more of. I remember I was on a train recently and I saw the NYX one that looks like Elmer's glue. And I was like, is that something that you want to put on your face? But it's gotten a lot of great reviews. I haven't tried it yet, so I can't really give you my review on it. But definitely these gripping type primers are really good because they're for people that, where you apply your foundation and then a couple hours later it starts lifting off your nose, it lifts off your cheek in a certain area. Maybe you're producing too much oil there, or the texture of the skin is different. Gripping primers are really going to be like makeup glue. So you're going to put them on, the makeup's going to stick to it. It's designed for staying power, so longevity, especially for foundations that maybe aren't as long wear, you can make them more long wear by using gripping primers. I know that when I've used gripping primers before, the people I'm applying it to do say that it does feel heavier. So it's not going to be this like light application. You will feel it, but it maybe is good for those nights out or a special event where you really want to make sure the makeup doesn't come off, like your wedding day, something like that. The last type I want to talk about is color correcting primers. So these are primers that come in various tones. There's the most popular one, I think, is green. So it's opposite color theory. So, if you look at a color wheel, opposite colors, I talk about this all the time for neutralizing problems on the skin or color correcting. But red and green are opposites. So green is one that you see often used to help bring back redness. There's Rosalique. That's a brand that I've used. They have this redness green type of cream. I think it's like it has moisturizer, SPF, everything built in. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I'll link it. And it's just so good if you have rosacea or just redness or sensitive skin. It really cancels that out. You'll see a lot of Asian, like when I've been to Japan, the Japanese and the Koreans love putting these green kind of primers in because, they want to cancel the redness and have this evenness. I see it a lot in their sun protection products. So that's a good one. Lavender is good for sallowness. So if you find that maybe you have some yellow that you want to brighten, lavender is a really good one. And then peach for dullness. So this is going to be where you maybe have dark circles or you just want to brighten the skin without it looking gray. The peach color correcting primers are really good. The company that I don't think I wrote this down for the product suggestions, but one I remember is Makeup Forever used to, I don't know if they still have them. They used to create, there was like 3 or 4 color correcting primers that were kind of these like lavender and green and peach shades. And they still might make them. They were really fabulous. So that's a good option for those. So before we write off kind of is a primer for you, I really want you to ask yourself, what exactly do you want your skin to do under your makeup? So it's not just about, I talk about skincare being so important. It's not just about the skincare being just right, but how do you want the finish of your skin to be? Do you want it glowy? Do you want it matte? Do you want it to stay a certain way? Do you want longevity? This is going to be where you're going to figure out what primer is right for you or if any of them are right for you. So before we get into all the products, I want to do some myth busting because I think this is something primers are kind of controversial. Some people swear by them, some people say they don't work. So the first one I want to talk about is primer makes your makeup last longer always. And this isn't always true because, like I said, those people will see a hydrating, glowy primer and think, oh, it's going to give me glow and make my makeup last because it's a primer. It's not. It's there for glow and hydration, the blurriness to blur. If you want your makeup to last, you need to use ones that are gripping primers or long wear primers. Like Urban Decay does an all-nighter primer, which is really nice for longevity. So that's another good one. So remember, primers is if you want the longevity aspect of it, make sure you're using ones that are made for long wear. The next myth is silicone-based primers clog pores, and this has been kind of talked about a lot. I definitely will admit there are sensitivities to silicone. It's pretty much in 75%, I would say, of all cosmetics, like lipsticks and foundations, even foundation moisturizers have silicone. You'll see it, you'll know it because it's like trimethicone is a great, anything that ends in C-O-N-E, cone, tends to be silicone. You'll see some new variations because they're coming out with different polymers, different versions of silicone that have different names. There's websites you can run your products through to see the ingredients. So there are sensitivities to silicone. But the main reason why silicone is so popular is that in the 60s and even before that, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they used to use oil-based makeup. You would hear about like grease paints, and oil-based obviously would clog your pores and break you out. So silicone was an invention of adding a slip to the makeup to give it kind of that oil aspect without it actually being oil. And so that's why it became so popular and still is today. So to get to that myth, so most silicones that are used, I think, today in cosmetics are non-comedogenic, so meaning it's not going to clog your pores. I think the real issue is removal. So the thing you'll see with silicone is that it definitely puts a layer on your skin, and your skin can't breathe as easily as it can if it wasn't there. So I think the main issue is people not removing it properly. So if you just wash your face with like a foam cleanser or soap or whatever to remove your makeup, you're not breaking down that silicone. So that's why that kind of two-step cleansing is so popular. Oil-based cleansing first to melt the makeup, melt the silicone off, then a clarifying foamy type of cleanser to then remove the oil. So this is going to be a really great step to prevent that silicone sitting on your skin and clogging it after. So just make sure you're cleaning it all off before you go to bed and that you're cleaning it properly. The last myth I want to talk about is if you use good skincare, you don't need a primer. And it's not always true, because you can do the most amazing skincare routine, but your skin will look fabulous before foundation. But once you start adding concealer and foundation on, it's going to react different to maybe the skincare that you're using. So maybe you need that barrier. Often I talk about kind of mixing water and oil, right? So if you're using like silicone-based products on water-based moisturizer, you'll get that pilling where it starts lifting up and balling up. Sometimes if you don't have a choice, like you can't use a different type of moisturizer, but you want to use specific foundation, putting that primer on as a barrier will help you not get that separation. So I think that skincare is going to be about hydration, nourishing, addressing, key issues that you have on your skin. But primer is going to be about preparing your skin for makeup. So if you're not wearing makeup, you don't need it. But you could probably put like a blurring one on with skincare and some concealer and you'd be fine. But I think if you're going to use different types of cosmetics on top of your skincare, then you want to make sure that you're controlling the oil, the texture, the glow. Then this is where primers are going to benefit you most. Okay, so I want to talk about how pro artists use primers. So not just how kind of the everyday person, but I want to give you some tips on kind of like how we would do it backstage on a photo shoot. Maybe if I'm preparing someone for a special event, how I would use primers. So I think in the real world, you obviously, would use it just to get maybe your longevity or your glow. But my technique that I talked about earlier is zone priming. So this is what I like to call zone priming, meaning that you're applying primer in specific zones of the face because it addresses the issue in that zone only. So this is where you're going to use the hydrating primers on dry areas, or maybe just where you want glow, like top of the cheekbones, bridge of the nose, Cupid's bow. You know, if you ever see me highlight or use a lighter shade on the chin, it's not because it just works for everyone. It's because if someone doesn't have a prominent chin, it helps create balance on the face. So if you're someone who has a strong chin or a wide chin, I wouldn't put glow or highlighter on there. But if you're someone who maybe doesn't have a strong chin, this is a really good way to create balance on the face. So that's where I kind of would use hydrating primers. And then I would use the pore-filling ones on areas, especially around the nose, that have more texture, bigger pores, sometimes onto the cheeks. And then a gripping primer where it tends to break down. So around the sides of the nose, the jawline, around the mouth where maybe you're drinking or eating and it starts lifting up. This is where I would put the longwear and the gripping primers. So zone priming is literally going to change your makeup. You have to try it. And then I usually like to allow primers to sit for probably about 60 seconds, couple minutes, because you really want to make sure the primer's not wet. You want it to kind of dry down before you apply your foundation. And this is also going to help you prevent that kind of pilling as well from it separating. You want it to dry down, lay on top of your skincare. Your skin has time to settle in with it, and then apply your foundation. And then for applying primers, you know I love using my hands and fingers for foundation, concealer, skincare. Primers, it really depends. I think hydrating primers, I love to use my hands, kind of melt it in because it's almost like skincare. And then if I'm using something kind of blurring or mattifying, a brush or sponge works really well because it allows you to target it, press it in. You're not worried about the finish like foundation where the texture, you know, the way it looks, you know, like foundation, I like to use my fingers so I can get that kind of texture and the warmth. I think with these type of primers, targeting it with like a flat brush or a skincare silicone brush works really well. Now let's get to product recommendations. I know you all want to hear this because I always try to give you my favorite ones. I'm going to go down step by step, kind of the ones like from where I started, hydrating primers first. So hydrating primers, a really, really good hydrating primer that I still love to use is Bobbi Brown does a vitamin enriched face base. So if you ever use this, it's kind of like skincare meets primer. It's like a hybrid. It's very rich and luxe, and it creates a smooth canvas. So this is really good for mature skin, dry skin, where you want to add that glow underneath your foundation. This is a really good one. And then if that's too expensive for you, the most affordable one that I like using that's hydrating is Revolution Makeup does a Superbase Hydra Primer. It's more lightweight hydrating. It has no greasiness to it, but it's a really good kind of hydrating one, and the price point's really good. Mattifying Primers. So for mattifying primers, Tatcha it's a Japanese one, and I think it's kind of like a mainstream Japanese skincare brand because you obviously have your brands like Haru Lobo and some of these that are more kind of, I mean, that's quite famous in Japan. But if you're not familiar with Japanese skincare, that one is quite kind of well known, but it's not as popular in the West. Where Tatcha, I think, is kind of really, you know, a lot of influencers, makeup artists use it. It's gorgeous packaging. It's expensive, but some of their products like it's not primer, but the like dewy skin spray, or I think it's the dewy moisturizer. It's fabulous. It looks so beautiful. I always have such a great result when I do it for a glowy look. But Tatcha does a primer called the Silk Canvas, and it comes in this kind of like, it's like a balm, and it's in this jar, and it almost looks like solid soap, and you put it on and it just gives you this like, it's almost like a hybrid. I have it as mattifying, but it definitely controls oil, but it also blurs because it just softens it, and it's you have to try it. If you're near Sephora, or if you're in the UK and you're like at Space NK, they have it. I think in the US, Sephora has it. It's just, if you're in Australia, I think Mecca has it. It's just kind of like such a fabulous primer. The one that I would recommend that's a little bit more budget friendly is the Ordinary does one called the High-Adherence Silicone Primer. And this is really effective. It's a cult classic for a reason because the price point's there. It has a lot of silicone in it, but it just really mattifies. It's really good to use under foundation if you have oily skin. Now for blurring and pore-filling primers, I really like the Hourglass Veil Mineral Primer. So it's in this kind of like glass container, like, jar, long jar, and you do it and it just feels really rich. Like, you can tell it has like minerals in it, almost like, like mineral makeup. It has such a like luxurious texture, and the finish I think is more like velvety, but it's great under foundation for that kind of like blurring kind of effect. I don't know. I don't think like the e.l.f. one I mentioned earlier, the putty primer, I think is better at filling pores, but this one's better for blurring. And then something that's more affordable, Maybelline does a baby skin instant pore eraser. Who loves baby skin? I mean, everyone wants baby skin, right? So baby skin instant pore eraser. It's a very kind of old school one. They've had around forever, but it still holds up, and it's still a really good one, and the price is great. Now for gripping primers, the affordable one is not the e.l.f. one I mentioned earlier. e.l.f. does another one called Power Grip Primer, and they're in these like squeezy tubes. This one is the niacinamide version. So they have like different, there's like a green, red, I forget, I think it's red, this one, but just look for the niacinamide version. It's sticky. So you put it on and it's definitely sticky and you're like, oh, I don't know about this, but it holds onto your foundation. So, and niacinamide's really great for oily skin types, acne prone skin. It's really great for texture, over the long term. So you should be using it on your skincare if you have these concerns. But this one's sticky and it really just holds onto the foundation. And I didn't have this under gripping or longwear, but I mentioned earlier is the Urban Decay one, the all-nighter primer, is really great for longwear. It just really makes your makeup last. Now, lastly, color correcting primers. So high-end Dr. Jart does a Sika Pear Tiger Grass primer. And it's green toned, but it really calms the redness. I think it has a lot of skincare benefits built in that are going to help with the redness, address that. But it's really great. It's luxurious feeling. The packaging is really nice. If you want something more affordable, LA Girl, I don't know if they have these in the UK. I actually use these in the States a lot. I'll have to check. But LA Girl does these Pro Prep color correcting primers. They come in various skin tones. I think they do kind of like the green, the peach, lavender. I'm trying to remember what other ones they do, but the price is like, you can get a ton of them. So it's a really good one, especially if you're new to color correcting. It's a great one to use. So I think primers are, it's something that you don't have to use every day. It's something that you can use when it's necessary, or maybe, your skin changes seasonally, it changes monthly. You have to really kind of see what your skin's doing and what you want to address. So I think primer is a good tool to use in your makeup routine to achieve the skin type that you want and what you need for that specific day that you want to change it. And I think it's just something that you should really look into, try out before you write off primers. Really think about if maybe you haven't tried the correct primer for your skin type. And if you've just tried one that someone said was the best, try maybe some of these other ones I've mentioned that maybe address what your skin needs the most. So thank you so much for listening. Pop down in the comments your favorite primers or any other questions you have on it. I'll hopefully get your answers to you. And make sure to subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Please hit the subscribe, and I will see you next time.